Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Eric, and today we're going to look at this, which is the National Railway Museum's version of 66779 Evening Star. Now, I drove this last summer, so when this popped up on Facebook Marketplace, I couldn't say no. Obviously it is second hand, so I'm going to have to do a couple little bits of cleaning and a few tweaks. And also I'm going to fit full lighting and full sound, so stay tuned and enjoy. I've just got Evening Star out of its box. None of the detailing was fitted, so I'm fitting that in a minute. So first of all, I put the draw hook in, just a tiny dab of super glue on the back of it. You don't need a lot at all, the tiniest little bit, and it pushes in, it will stay there. You'll see below that I've fit the valance. Again, very small amount of super glue, but before you put super glue on it, make sure it fits first, because they don't always fit in the holes, and then you'll end up with a mess. But if you are fitting the valance to one of these, what I recommend you doing is, you see the NEM pocket here, because I'm gluing the valance in anyway, and it's never going to come off again, just shave down the NEM pocket, because you'll find on a lot of these, it doesn't always happen, but on sort of 2/3 of the 66s I've had, the NEM pocket will hit the back of the valance, and that will then cause your loco to derail. Also clean the wheels. Look at that middle one compared to the outer two. To get the bogies out, the bogie frames, sorry, I stick a flathead screwdriver in and very gently just twist. Clean the wheels. You can see I'm just using a grey Scotch-Brite pad. They're not very abrasive at all, just enough to get any leftover paint and stubborn dirt off the wheel rims themselves. So you can see there's a little bit of paint, a little dot of paint on there. That'll come off. But other than that, they're very clean now. So just give them another little quick go over and they should be perfect. So then just make sure you're careful with the pickups when you put them back in. I normally just rest them in the bogie frame like this, and then if you push them over, then push them in, that saves you getting the pickups trapped. Whereas if you come straight in from the top, you'll probably damage the pickups. So just bear that in mind. So I've got the V5 decoder installed. Just uploading the file now. As you can see, it's right in the sound memory. This is, as you'd expect, a Legomanbiffo sound file. I tend to use his files mainly. What I've done with this one is, because I managed to drive this loco for about a week or two, I took the opportunity to take a sound recording of the bell. It's only an electronic bell, but it does sort of work. So I took a recording of that and I've sent it to Biff, and he's then put it in the file. If you do have an Evening Star and you're gonna get a new decoder for it, make sure you ask him, because you can get the bell put on. And I'll put a little video of the bell in action so you can hear what it sounds like. So here's the loco with the body off. You can see what I've done here. So standard, they obviously don't come with a speaker, but they do come with the little housing for a 20x40 rectangle speaker, which sits here. There's two little screw holes. So you can see I've taken that out and I've fitted an EM1 speaker. These normally come with tabs on the end, so you have to cut these off, and then obviously cut the little plug off the end and solder that onto the two speaker terminals. So that's in there. It fits in, just fits in there, like squeezes in really nicely. It's just held in there with some black tack. The wires for the lighting each end have a little channel in the chassis, so they run along that little channel, and they're secured in there by black tack also. But yeah, so this is an EM1. Now, because they're only half a watt, they aren't quite man enough to cope with the output of a Loksound decoder by themselves, so you need another speaker wired in to offset that. So you can see this end, I have put a sugar cube here. I've used it with the smallest enclosure size because that helps it clear the top of the roof, and it sits just sort of around here, so it just sits offset to where the silencer moulding is, so there's enough room for that to slide in there. This is a V5 that I'm fitting, and on a V5 you can just about get away with running an EM1 speaker with an 8 ohm speaker in parallel. You're not supposed to do this because I can't remember what the actual ohms is. I think it works out as about 3 ohms, 2 or 3 ohms instead of 4. but a V5 will cope. But it's not recommended to do this, and it's not specified in the manufacturer's sort of instructions that you can do this. The way you're supposed to do it is run them in series. So you run one speaker wire to this speaker, for example, then the other speaker wire that comes out of the EM1 will then run to the sugar cube, and then the other wire from the sugar cube will go to the other speaker terminal. So that's the way you're supposed to do it. I've done it this way just because it gives you a bit more volume, you get a bit more power out of it, but obviously I wouldn't recommend doing it like this unless you're pretty confident, because if it goes wrong and you blow the amp on the decoder is then useless. So just take that on board. But yeah, you can see it goes in nicely, so it's worth doing. And this is, without milling the chassis, this is the best combo you're going to get in a 66 made by Bachmann. Right then, we've got Evening Star back on the work area. It's been a long time since I fitted the sound in this, but I think it's about time that I finished it off. So the plan is, now that the sound's in, obviously as I mentioned in the video before that you would have seen, which was from quite a while ago, we've got a mixture of an EM1 and a sugar cube speaker. We've got a V5 decoder with Legomanbiffo's Hattons 66 file, which obviously I'm going to have to play with the function mapping quite a lot to get the lights working. But talking of lights, before I finish all the mapping on the decoder to my sort of standard, what I'm doing now is taking the opportunity while it's in bits to fit new lighting PCBs from Illuminated Models. So Illuminated Models sell basically a replacement for the Bachmann lighting PCBs that you can see here. There's a bit of a closer look at them. So the problem with these is they don't have any marker lights and the nighttime headlight doesn't function. So Illuminated Models sell their own PCBs, and you can just about see on the one underneath there that it's got all the extra LEDs. So you'll see on the left it's got the daytime headlight, it's got the LEDs for the marker lights and the tail lights next to each other, and then on the opposite side you can just about see it's got the nighttime headlight. Obviously this is going to involve a lot of wiring, and you can just simply fit this in a standard loco and wire it up the same way that the headlights are wired normally. However, that will mean that the marker lights and the headlight is always on together, sorry, I should say. What I intend to do is go one step further, and I'm going to wire all of this independently, and that will then allow me, once I've mapped the decoder, to make use of all the functions and mean that when I turn the lights on initially with F0, that will just turn on the marker lights themselves and the tail lights. Then I can turn on the daytime headlight independent. I can put the nighttime headlight on independent of that, and then have that at the same time switch the daytime one off. And I can also switch the tail lights off when I'm pulling the train without going underneath the model and messing about with that horrible switch that's under there, because there's nothing worse than having to take your loco off the track to turn the taillights off. Failing that, having the taillights glaring on your first wagon. So what I'm going to do is, I've got their instructions here, which they show you. So basically they've got a diagram of how the standard Bachmann PCB is wired, so it's very helpful. They've also got a diagram of how their little PCB is wired. So I'm basically going to follow both of these, and I'm going to, on this end, wire the front marker lights on. So this is the number 2 end. So this is going to have the marker lights wired into the standard headlamps. Other than that, everything else is going to have to be wired straight to the decoder. So as mentioned, this is a Loksound V5, which has 10 functions, which is enough to control all of this lighting and independent cab lights. So I will have to modify the cab lights later. But I'm basically going to have to wire all the functions to those little solder points on the end of the decoder there. Yeah. So I'm not going to bother filming it because it's really boring. I'm sure you can go on YouTube and find plenty of people soldering things, and obviously being a bit heavy-handed, I've got to resolder that speaker wire as well. But yeah, so I'll come back when that's done. So we've got the PCB in on the number 1 end. I have discarded the standard Bachmann light diffuser, and instead I've used little pieces of blue tack just rolled up to separate the LEDs off from each other. So separate the marker lights from the headlights, and just a little bit along the top as well to stop any light bleed. This allows the LEDs to sit right up against the back of the lenses on the front of the Loco. So that will allow it to look a lot better and stop any iffiness, if you like, with the lights. Before you go any further and start wiring it into the decoder, just want to double check that the PCB works. So what you can do is get a multimeter, put it on diode mode like this, which is the usual mode you'll use for continuity if you like listening out for the little beep. The middle pin on the Bachmann PCB, this one here, is the positive for the white lights. Then this pin at the bottom is the negative for the markers, which is what I've got it wired into. So what I'll do is I'll just put my lead on the red, on the positive and the negative there. And there you go, we have got the marker lights lit up, and there's not too much light bleed, which is pretty good. And they do look good. So obviously now I know, I've done this with the other ones as well. So I've done it with the reds and I've done it with the headlights, so I know that this works properly. So I'm going to go ahead and fit it all in and wire it up. I will do the same with the other end though, so just a little tip for you. Here is Evening Star all finished then, and it's still got the body off just so I can show you what's going on. So to give you a quick rundown now that it's all done, obviously we've got the Loksound V5, which is a 10 function decoder, which is handy because you can have everything independent. We've got an EM1 speaker, and I then changed the Sugar Cube for an iPhone 6 speaker, just a single one, and that is in parallel with the EM1, which is probably a little bit too powerful for if you had a V4, but a V5 can just about cope with it. So to run you through the wiring though, basically if you want it all independent like I've done, what you need to do is you need to wire the marker lights on each end to the function on the printed circuit board for the standard position of the white headlamps. The reason for this is because 66s obviously have a marker light in the body shell also at the top, just by the bell. Now that marker light will come on with the directional headlight that's built into the circuit board. Obviously it's done through these little plugs. So that's why you need to put the marker lights on the circuit board themselves and then wire everything else onto the decoder. So as I said, you've got marker lights on the number 2 end are going to the correct solder point here. Marker lights on the number 1 end are going again to the solder point on this end for the white headlights. Now for the rest of them, if I can zoom into the decoder, you'll see we've got a green wire, purple, green, purple, then 2 reds. Starting from the first green wire that you can see towards the bottom, that is the daytime headlamp for the number 2 end, so the end with the speaker. Next, that is the purple, which is the nighttime headlamp for number 2 end. Then we've got green again, which is the daytime headlight for the number 1 end. And again, repeated with the purple, the nighttime headlamp for number 1 end. Then we've got the 2 reds, which are the tail lamps for each end. And the first one is for the number 2 end, the second one is for the number 1 end. So basically, it just makes it a bit easier when you're going through programming them. It doesn't matter which order you put them in, but this just saves you a little bit of time because you know it's number 2, number 2, number 1, number 1, number 2, number 1. You just it's a bit of a help if the headlamp ones are next to each other, but it's no biggie. But obviously you can see how tiny the solder points are on there, so you've really got to be careful that you don't get any solder across the terminals. Now if you do accidentally get any solder across these, you shouldn't blow the chip in theory. What will actually happen is, say I go to put the daytime headlight on, which is this green wire here, if I've got a bit of solder going across to the purple, then you'll have both of the lights come on at the same time and you won't be able to disable them. So if you get that happening and you've got no way of disabling one headlight, take the body back off and just really get like a magnifying glass or try and zoom on your phone or something and see if you've got any solder stuck in between there. Obviously really make sure not to do that, but in some cases we do miss things, so there you go. What else I've done is, obviously Bachmann 66s, much like most Bachmann Locos, a bit lazy with the old wiring, so the cab lights both come on together on aux 1. So press aux 1 for the cab light, you won't get directional, you'll just have both on together, which is obviously rubbish. What I've had in the past is if you leave, say you leave the number 1 end attached to aux 1, and you just separate the number 2 end cab light and put it on the solder pad, which you handily have here, I find that you'll get one that's a lot brighter than the other, just the way it all goes through the circuit board and things like that. So what I've done is I've separated, I think it's the B terminal. You can't see it because it's actually underneath the little circuit board, but if you pop these screws out and take it out, I think it's terminal B, that is the negative for the cab light. So I've just desoldered it from there and popped the wire out of the way under some tape and in some black tack here. Done it on both ends, just because if you ever want to, for some odd reason, revert it to its original spec, you've still got the wire there rather than cutting it off. So what I've done is, instead of that, I've run a wire from each one through to the middle of the body shell, done a little sort of loop in there so you've got a bit of excess if you ever need it. That is definitely a top tip to remember to do that. Don't make your wires too tight, because one day you will break one and you'll need a little bit extra. But yeah, so wrap a little bit around there, bit of black tack or electrical tape, or both in my case. And then I've just simply got them going up to the aux 1 and aux 2 solder pad that you can see there on the printed circuit board for the Loco. Literally as easy as that. So then you just plug these in as normal. Obviously you've got to bear in mind that you've got these permanently attached, so just leave a bit of excess there, which will just be all right. It will fit when the body's on, depending on what Loco you've got. If you've got something like a 20 or something like that, you want to leave as minimum as possible really, but on this you can get away with it. You could fit a plug in the roof here if you really wanted to, but I wasn't too bothered. The only other thing I've done is I've fitted a driver from Model U, and I fitted a high-vis jacket also on the second man side above the seat, because on 66s you do have a coat hook there, so I do sometimes use it for my jacket. And obviously he's got the old GB Rail Freight coloured shirt and tie with his high-vis trousers. I left them as they were. I think this is a driver from Westall Wagon Works, one of their Lazy Bob drivers. I'm pretty sure it is the same as just a Model U driver, just obviously they come painted. But that'll look the part. It sort of looks a bit like me, I suppose. But yeah, so I'm going to chuck the body back on now. We'll fire it up and we'll have a little look at how it runs. Here we are then on the layout. The Loco's back together, ready to run. We've got the lighting all working. And you can see my little figure in there that I've placed in, and his little jacket on the left. Really does help. I've also taken the time to fit the etched nameplates on the side. So we've got a little shed plate on the front, we've got a build plate there, and we've got evening star plates on the side, as you'd expect. Obviously this is the National Railway Museum model, so it comes in a gloss finish without the nameplates applied. They are a bit of a pain to apply, so a little tip for doing them is to mark out with some fine masking tape the edges, because they go in the middle of these big panels. Mark the ends and then get another piece of masking tape and match it up on the inside, and again on that side, and then again until you get as close as you can to the width of the nameplate. Also go across from the top of the GBRF lettering, the appropriate height away from the top of that. Go all the way across and leave that bit on, and then you should have a piece of tape straight across where you can butt it up against two height wise, and you should have two pieces either side, which will make it a lot easier. Even if there's a little gap, it's a lot easier to then locate the plate in the middle than going off the edges further up. So that's a little tip for you, and obviously you can see them fitted there. It makes a nice little difference having them. I'm not too keen on the build plates, if I'm honest. They look a bit naff. The problem with those is they are printed on the body underneath, and the printed versions are probably the same size ish, so if you get them just the tiniest bit out, then you can see the silver plates underneath, so I'm not too pleased with that. But anyway, you can see obviously we've got just the leading cab light on, which is a nice touch. You can see the little figure in there just chilling with his feet up, as you'd expect for a 66 driver, pretty standard. Also you can see I've got the bells on because, as I said, this is the National Railway Museum edition. But yeah, so let's fire it up. We'll get a few little running shots of it, and also I'm going to take it for a little proper running session at a friend's layout that's now in development, which is going to be quite exciting to see. So just quickly before I start it, I will just run through the functions with you. Not all of them, but just the main ones such as lighting and things like that, just to let you know what I've done. To start off with, before I actually start the engine, you can hear the Spirex valves are going off at the minute. I've got them set to run all the time because in real life they would, obviously providing that the Loco's got air in it. So I have them on all the time. I do that on the 20s and things like that as well. You can turn them off with, I think it's function 18, but I generally leave them on. The engine will drown them out anyway. Lighting wise, at the minute we've got the stabling lights on, which is the tail lights on at both ends. I put this on function 20. I do this on all my Locos. So basically function 20 on, red's both ends for if it's sitting in the siding. Turn those off and the lights will come off. We have got function 0, which will bring on the marker lights and the tail lights at the rear. Function 10 will disable those tail lamps at the rear. So if I just change ends, then press function 10, there you go, the tail lamps will automatically extinguish. If I just change ends again, you'll see the marker lights are still on. So I'll put F10 back off again, so we've got tail lamps. Now if I press F11, that will bring on the daytime headlamp. And what you can do with this, the way I've programmed it, if the layout goes to night mode, which obviously mine does cycle through if I turn it on, then I can go to F21. If I hit F21, obviously it's 10 above F11, so it's easy to remember. And the daytime headlamp will go off and the nighttime headlamp will come on. So you see that there. And again, if I turn 21 off, then the nighttime lamp goes off, the daytime one comes on. So it's a really nice little feature that. Obviously, if you've got a layout like mine where you have the option of having automatic lighting that cycles through day and night mode, you can use this option. And it just gives you another level of detail really. If I press F19, so just turn that headlamp off, F19 will disable the cab light. If I turn F19 off, the cab light comes back on again. If you move, then the cab light will turn off automatically. There you go. So anyway, let's hear the sound. Well, there we go then. There's Bachmann 66 fully upgraded. Sorry it was a bit of a long video, but it is what it is. It's quite an involved job, and it was nice to get some running shots in there as well at the end. I'm sure you'll agree it's been well worth the work. Obviously we've got the full independent lighting using marker lights, which they don't come with, and we've got daytime and nighttime headlights. This, as I mentioned, is done through an Illuminated Models PCB. They're a little bit fiddly when you first try and do it, but once you get used to them, they're not too bad at all to work with. I've got, I think, 3 other 66s to do after this, and then I've got to modify some 37s for Richard, who owns that Garforth flare, which you would have just seen. It's going to be a bit of a monster, that, so keep an eye out on Facebook and Instagram at Garforth Model Railway for that. And I'm sure I'll be running there quite often because he's only 5 minutes up the road from me, so keep an eye out. But yeah, Illuminated Models PCB, under a tenner, worth doing. That is run through a Loksound V5 21-pin decoder. That is sourced through Chile and Princess Risborough Railway, who I get all my decoders from. The sound file on there is Legomanbiffo's most recent 66, which is normally used for the Hattons model. Now, you have to make a few changes to use it in a Bachmann 66 for the lighting functions and all that, especially if you're going to do what I've done here and use your own custom lighting setup. It's a great project. Just make sure that if you want to model Evening Star, then you let them know, because as I mentioned, they can put the bell on, which I recorded myself from the actual loco while I was driving it earlier in summer 2020. But yeah, I'm really happy with that. I really do think it will hold its own against the Hattons model. If you put them side to side, other than rotating axle boxes, which is a bit of a gimmick and you don't need, you're not really going to notice. And the Bachmann model is a lot more durable. I have had to fix a Hattons one for someone, and getting it apart was a complete nightmare. And then we don't even want to talk about putting it back together. But yeah, so if you enjoyed that or you found it useful, please chuck us a comment down below, like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.